Hello, and welcome to this Ethical Dilemma in Science, where we're going to take a look into basically ethical concerns associated with solar power and ultimately consider kind of the broader question of, is solar power the light at the end of the tunnel leading to a replacement of fossil fuels? Taking a look at the solar future studies put out by the U.S. Department of Energy in 2021, I think. Actually, don't have it on here. 2020 or 2021. This report basically indicates that with a little bit of effort and a commitment, upwards of about 40% of U.S. energy could be produced by solar power by 2035. So basically, 15, no, it's not 2020 anymore, 13 years from now. And so what we're looking at over here on this slide, we've got fossil fuels over here in gray. We've got this green for other zero carbon energy sources. And then kind of in the kind of lighter pinkish color, orangish color, is going to be solar energy. Over here on the other side, we've got kind of the kind of mid-level blue as being buildings, the kind of lighter blue as being industry, so like energy used by factories and in construction. And then not appearing here, but ultimately appearing in 2035 and ultimately 2050, transportation. And so these are your electric vehicles that are in the news today. And so this idea is that over time we're going to go from 2020, where we've got a mix of fossil fuels and zero carbon energy sources, reducing our dependence on fossil fuels with kind of continued development of these zero carbon sources as well as electrification. So using solar energy and then providing that energy for both buildings, industry, and ultimately expansion of transportation using electric energy. And so in order to do this, we need to make a solid commitment to doing that. But it has the potential to work. It has the potential to generate a lot of clean energy jobs, as well as kind of reduce emissions associated with burning of fossil fuels to generate the energy that we need to go through our daily lives. And so if we take a look at solar energy, we got to understand, what is it about solar that allows it to have energy? And so kind of what are the properties of light that allow it to carry energy kind of forward. And so what we can see is that light is a form of electromagnetic energy. It's a little bit technical, but basically there is energy that is going to be present and inherent within light. And then that light will then interact with objects. What we see in the world around us is light interacting with objects. And so, if you take a look at a rainbow, you can see that the waves of light, the energy associated with the light has slightly different kind of amounts, slightly different, I don't want to get too technical, kind of slightly different kind of levels of energy associated with wavelengths, if you want to think about it like that. And so if you separate it by wavelengths, you can end up with this kind of rainbow of colors that are present within the light. And so that rainbow of colors, white light, is going to hit an object. And what we're going to see is what happens with the light on the surface of that object is going to determine what it looks like when we view it. And so in this case, we have the situation where, we've got the orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet kind of all being absorbed by this surface here. But this red kind of energy of light, this red wavelength of light is going to be bouncing off. Okay, so all of a sudden we see the situation where light hits an object and the color we perceive is going to be what are those wavelengths, or what is that energy of light that is reflected off of them. And so if we take a look at this and apply it a little bit further, down here in the corner, we've got a white object, a light-colored object. And so we've got the rainbow of light kind of coming in, all mixed together, so it appears as white light. And then all of that kind of bounces off this white surface. And so none of that energy is going to be kind of absorbed by the surface. In contrast, over here, we've got a darker object, a black object over here, and we've got, again, this rainbow of light all mixed together, giving us white light, is going to hit the surface, and it's going to appear dark because it is absorbing all of that energy. It's absorbing all of that light. And so again, like I said, in this case, a dark object is absorbing the light and absorbing the absorbing the light energy, where a white object is reflecting or at least bouncing off that light energy. And in doing so, it's not absorbing the light and it's not absorbing the light energy. And so if we put this kind of into greater perspective, here we've got a Crookes radiometer. This is basically kind of been almost like a little light tube, light bulb, often in a vacuum. We've got this rod coming up. We've got a little pivot point, and then we've got these little foils that are present here. They've got a dark side and a light side. When light hits this, it's basically going to do what we saw in that previous light. The white light is going to hit that white surface and bounce off. It's not going to absorb the energy, but the light is going to come in and it's going to kind of hit that black surface, and it's going to appear black because it's going to be absorbing all of the energy. So it's going to be absorbing the energy. And as it's absorbing the energy, it's going to start to heat up. And as it starts to heat up, it's going to start to heat the air kind of around it. And in doing so, that's going to cause the air to kind of expand and push against this little little foil kind of extension here. So what happens then, as we shine light on this Crookes radiometer, the black surface is heating up. That's heating up the air and pushing it along, and so we can see it, in essence, being an example of solar energy here, causing the spinning of this radiometer. And so the only thing going on here is that light is hitting it, the light is heating up the black side, and the black side hitting the air and causing this to spin. Okay, so we can see that light has energy, and light has the ability to transfer that energy onto objects. And so, kind of taking a look at this, kind of the traditional, and I don't want to say, I'll call it traditional, but the kind of most biologically important form of solar energy, my view, maybe not others' view, is this concept of photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, what we've got, again, if I get my pointer here, is the sunlight here. The sunlight is going to be coming in, and it's going to be interacting with special cells within a plant. Technical kind of over here, kind of looking at the structure. But basically what's going to happen is that sunlight comes in, and it's going to provide the energy that's necessary for the plant cells to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugar. So when doing this, these plants are doing, kind of conversion of solar energy from light energy into nutrient energy, into the sugars, and all of the kind of good organic biological molecules that we need for life. And so it's going to provide the energy for the plant, and it's going to provide energy for those organisms that feed upon the plant. And organisms that feed upon the organisms that feed upon the plants. So in this case here, we've got, again, this concept of solar energy, the sunlight powering the conversion of carbon dioxide and water into sugar that we use and all living organisms use as a basis for our nutrients. Taking a look at this in an extended example, what we can see is it's going to be important that sunlight make it to the surface of the planet. Over here, we got the planet Earth. And so we've got, the sunlight here kind of coming in, kind of focused in on the equator here. And so what we can see is that when the sun is kind of directly overhead, it's going to put that kind of beam of sunlight. And again, recognize that we're just taking a look at a small region of the solar energy. It's going to be kind of constant within this entire span of the globe. But within this kind of beam of solar energy, kind of artificially looked at, it's all going to be concentrated, kind of with the sun overhead here, like we would see in the northern hemisphere in the summer, the sun overhead is going to concentrate that sunlight and the energy associated with the sunlight over a small location. In contrast, as we go kind of further away from the equator, kind of closer to the poles, what we can see is that that sunlight is coming in, and a portion of it's going to be bouncing off the atmosphere. But the amount that comes in through the atmosphere is actually going to be spread out over a broader region of the surface here. And so, taking a look at the same kind of generic sunbeam here, kind of the same kind of width of the sunbeam coming in, at a lower angle, so in the northern hemisphere, like what we're going to see in the winter, at that low angle of sunlight is going to be coming in. That sunlight is going to be spread across a much wider area. And so it's going to kind of dilute the sunlight that's hitting it, and in doing so, it's going to dilute the energy, because that energy, same amount of energy we've got over here, energy concentrated in a small area over here in the summer, that energy is going to be spread out over a much larger area in the winter. So why is that important? And so if we take a look at this, we've got the Earth, and this is kind of representing the fact that we've got a tilt to the axis of the Earth, and so that the Earth is actually kind of a little bit off kilter. It's going to be kind of the North Pole isn't directly straight up. It's going to be kind of diverted over here by about 23 and a half degrees. And so what that means then is as the Earth is rotating, as we see, kind of days come, nights come, days come, night come, we're going to change, kind of what portion of the planet is going to be kind of exposed to the sunlight. And we see that in day and night. But then we've also got the Earth orbiting, moving in the right direction, the Earth orbiting around the sun. And so what we can see then is that with this elliptical orbit, kind of it changes what portion of the planet is going to be aimed at the sun during different periods of time. And so, there's this feeling that, perhaps, in the summer, the Earth is closer to the sun, and that's why it's hotter. In reality, in the North American summer, the Earth is actually further away from the sun than it is in the winter. And so what we're going to see then is, because of this tilt in the Earth's axis, as the Earth is orbiting around the sun, it changes the relative position of the Earth and the sun. And so that during periods of time where we have the spring equinox, generally about March 21st, or the spring equinox and the autumnal equinox, about September 21st, the sun is going to be in that relative position directly over the equator. But then if we go into the winter solstice, what we've got is that the sun is going to be kind of in relationship over the Tropic of, make sure I get this one right, over the Tropic of Capricorn, which is about 23.5 degrees latitude south, where over here in the summer, during the summer solstice, about June 21st, the northern hemisphere is going to be tilted towards the sun, and the sun is going to be directly above the Tropic of Cancer, so about 23.5 degrees of the north latitude. And so what we can see then is that with this tilt, and the fact that that tilt doesn't change as the Earth is orbiting around the sun, we've got basically the change of the seasons. We've got kind of a difference in the amount of sunlight hitting kind of regions of the planet, and with that amount of sunlight is going to change the amount of solar energy that is reaching the surface of the planet. And so if we take a look at this, again, focused in on the northern hemisphere, during the summer solstice, what's going to happen? The sun in its relative position is going to be kind of directly above the Tropic of Cancer. And so what that means is we've got this more direct, more concentrated sunlight hitting the northern hemisphere. In contrast, if we've got all of that light kind of hitting in the northern hemisphere, we've got less light hitting the light that is hitting the southern hemisphere is going to be spread out. And because it's going to be spread out, it's going to have less energy associated with it. Excuse me. In contrast, if we take a look at the winter solstice, again, still the tilt in the rotation, I'm sorry, the tilt in the axis of the Earth, the orbit has changed. So during the winter solstice, the northern hemisphere is basically aimed away from the sun in relative position. The southern hemisphere is aimed towards the sun in relative position. In this case, we've got the sun directly above the Tropic of Capricorn in that relative position between the sun and the Earth. And so what that means, again, for the northern hemisphere, is that the northern hemisphere is angled away from the sun. The sunlight is going to be coming in, and it's going to be spread out across a much larger region. And so for less kind of concentrated sunlight and less energy associated with that sunlight. And we can also see that tilt of the Earth and the position of the orbit around the sun affects the hours of daylight. And so this is a little bit of a complicated figure to take a look at. But basically what we've got in here is that in green, we're looking at basically 12 to 14 hours of sunlight. The kind of lighter blue is 10 to 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours kind of over here. And then what we're seeing over here is going to be either constant day or constant night as we're taking a look at here in relationship to a period of time. And so what we can see is that in the summer, when the Earth is kind of aimed towards the sun in terms of relative position, you can take a look at the North Pole, and it's going to be a period of constant day. And so that, that's kind of strange. The flip side of that is that the South Pole is going to be in constant night. And that's going to flip when we go over into the winter solstice that would be occurring over here. If we take a look at the December solstice here, we can see that the northern hemisphere, Alaska, is in great periods of darkness. The North Pole is in a constant period of darkness kind of throughout this entire period of time. And so what we can see then is that the position of the Earth in orbit, the tilt of the Earth, all affects the amount of sunlight hitting the Earth, the intensity of the sunlight, and related to that, the intensity or amount or concentration of the energy that is carried by the sunlight to the surface of the Earth. So that when we get to the point of taking a look at solar energy in the form of, again, producing electricity as opposed to producing sugars through photosynthesis or warming the surface of the planet with these seasonal changes, what we're looking at with solar energy is this conversion of solar energy into electrical energy that we can use to power our cell phones and our air conditioners, or all of that stuff that we need we think we need in terms of modern life. And so how do these things convert light energy into electricity? And so what we're looking at here is an example of a photovoltaic cell. So photo for sunlight or light, voltaic for electrical energy. We're converting sunlight into electrical energy. And basically it works much like what we can see in photosynthesis. So sunlight comes in, it hits a surface, and in hitting that surface, it's going to energize that surface. And so without getting into a lot of the physical properties associated with it, we basically, by transferring that solar energy, in our case, electromagnetic energy as opposed to heat energy, we're going to be making electrons move. And the electrons are going to move from one surface to the other surface. And in doing that, that movement of electrons is what generates electricity. And so we've got an example of a very simple photovoltaic cell here, sunlight hitting it, moving these electrons. And again, don't worry about what the electrons are doing, but it's going to be that flow of electrons that generates the flow of electricity. So a lot is going to be dependent on how good these cells are, these photovoltaic cells, these solar energy cells are at converting sunlight into electrical energy. Now in the 1980s, so roughly 40 years ago, these solar energy cells, these photovoltaic cells, were about 10% efficient. About 10% of the solar energy hitting the surface was converted into electricity. By 2015, that had risen to about 15%. By 2021, we're looking at about 20% efficiency. And so they're getting better, which means that they are going to be more effective at converting sunlight into electricity. Now, in an experimental standpoint, some of the solar cells that we put on satellites are approaching 50% efficiency. So half of the energy that hits the surface here is going to be converted into electrical energy. Now, they're still expensive to make, these experimental cells, but the technology is improving so that as we get more and more efficient solar cells, more efficient these photovoltaic cells, we're going to become more and more capable of producing the electricity that we need. And so what happens then is we take those individual cells and then we put them into panels and arrays, and this is what you're going to see, maybe put into solar fields, put onto the, kind of the surface of a house. Solar energy is going to come in, hit one of these arrays made up of panels made up of those solar cells, and that's going to convert, each one of those is going to convert a little bit of electricity, but the entire unit is going to produce a lot of electricity that is going to go into kind of a structure, and that structure is going to either kind of divert the energy off for direct current, so like your batteries and storage of the battery over here, or convert the energy into an alternating current, and that's like the electricity that you would be getting out of the wall socket. And so direct current is battery powered, AC alternating current is the electrical power that would be coming in on your wires. Now, ultimately, if you're taking a look at off-grid, that solar power over here, that array, is going to be powering, the house and what's needed in electricity within the house. But as more and more people develop solar technology installations on their places of business, on their homes, there remains the possibility that we could divert some of that excess energy onto the power grid that is providing electricity to all of our neighbors and hospitals and all of that. And so for the person that has the solar energy, get a little bit of a refund for the energy that they're producing, as well as not drawing energy off of the grid and having to pay for that energy. Okay, so if we take a look at this, concepts associated with solar energy is that right now, with the limited efficiency of these solar panels, about, maybe 20% now at this point, hopefully getting much better at the time, we need a fairly large surface area. And so we can see these installations that are occurring. They're going to be present on, the roofs of buildings. And so if we're looking at a commercial building, example, like a little warehouse here, in the example we've got here, it's probably not a whole lot of a concern if we've got these solar panels kind of laying flat along the roof. You're not going to see them unless you're flying over it. But what happens if we've got a historical building over here? In this case, we've got a historical building pulled off of a newspaper account from 2020 where they've started to install solar panels. And this is Wilmington, North Carolina, as opposed to Wilmington, Delaware. And so at this point, a megawatt of energy is going to require, between 3.5 to about 16.5 acres in order to generate this. And so it's going to require a lot of surfaces. It's going to require a lot of land or a lot of rooftops when we take a look at it. But we could use lands that are not being used for other things, that have been disturbed or potentially contaminated, can be used for the generation of solar power. And so that gives rise to one of the first ethical dilemma in science questions. How do you provide equitable access to the benefits of solar energy when the installations remain high? And so this is looking at various forms of renewable energy. Solar energy, move over here in the yellow, has come down about by half in the 5 years from 2013 to 2018. The hope is that that would continue to drop in price. But when we take a look at it, these rooftop installations tend to be still relatively expensive to be able to generate enough electricity for the house. Now, ultimately, they're going to be long-term savings. You're not going to be paying your electric bill under most circumstances if you've got one of these solar installations on your house. But there's a large upfront cost. Many people don't have the ability. They're going paycheck to paycheck. How are they going to be able to invest, thousands of dollars? A large solar installation on a house to power a larger house is probably going to run you 15, 20, $25,000. And that puts it out of the range for a lot of people. Even though there's going to be a long-term cost savings, there's a huge upfront cost. And so how do we ensure equitable access to the benefits? The benefits are you're not going to have to pay electricity, but the overall societal benefits is that you're reducing the dependence on fossil fuels. Now, in an effort to provide more equitable access, we can see that there are a lot of government programs. This is the federal government program looking at federal tax credits for installation of solar power. Other states have programs, loans, grants, rebates for the installation and financing, or I guess the financing and installation of these solar power systems. And so, is it enough what we're doing now? Taking a look at, should implementation of solar power energy technology be slowed to avoid materials produced with forced labor? This is a huge concern, and actually was a law passed by Congress and the Senate in 2021, signed into law in December 2021 by President Biden. Basically, it's called make sure I pronounce this correctly, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. About 45% of the global polysilicon, basically a form of kind of modified silicon, modified sand, if you want to think about it like that, is necessary for the production of these solar cells, these photovoltaic cells that we've got. About 45% of that comes from the Xinjiang region in northwest China. And as a key ingredient for solar panels, it's important. But if we take a look at that region, there are concerns of forced labor camps, internment camps, and human rights abuses associated with the Uyghurs and other ethnic Muslims within that region. And so we're looking at one of the few examples of unanimity within Congress and the Senate. In these days, that's kind of strange. It passed the House by 428 to 1. It was unanimously passed. All the senators voted for it. But basically, this is a law that says that a company must proactively prove, so prove up front before you start to bring in these materials, that the products are not made as a result of coercion or slavery or forced labor, what we're taking a look at here. Now, previously, the law said that you couldn't benefit from the products of slavery. You couldn't import goods made with slave labor. But that decision was being made by customs officials that determined whether or not there was a risk associated with it. This puts the onus on the companies using it to put the pressure on their suppliers to make sure that they're not using forced labor. And then finally, the main ethical dilemma in science I wanted to work with for today is this idea: should solar energy generation be concentrated in regions with the most sunlight? And so we've got, in this case, the National Oceanographic NOAA data over here, taking a look at the hours of sunlight per year. And what we can see here, purple is the most, and it's got about 50% more sunlight than we've got over here in the red. And so if you want to take a look at it, solar energy works well on bright sunny days. Doesn't work so well on cloudy days, doesn't work so well at night. And so should we be putting these things in a region that has the most sunlight? And so, do we concentrate solar energy production in the American Southwest? And then, where do we put it in the Southwest if we were to do that? Not in my backyard. Are we going to put these massive solar arrays in open areas, which potentially should be preserved for other regions? And how would that work? If we take a look at what the United States has right now, we've got three primary electrical grids being present. We've got a western grid from the Rockies west, we've got an eastern grid from the Rockies east, and then we've got the majority of Texas as this independent network down here. And so the idea is that each one of these electrical grids is interconnected. And so if energy is being produced in one region but needed in the other, they can shift that energy around within it. If we're going to be producing lots and lots of solar energy in the American Southwest, we've got to kind of connect in these different power grids so that the energy produced over here can be shifted and diverted to power those regions of the country that are potentially in less solar receptive areas. And so the estimate based on 2050, where we would be capable of generating enough electricity through the combination of solar power and other non-carbon emitting energy sources, we would need to be about 0.5% of the contiguous United States. So it corresponds to roughly about a third of the size of Pennsylvania would have to be set aside, not in one kind of huge area, but over the country, or concentrated within the American Southwest. It would be able to it would be necessary to do that, to generate enough solar energy to meet our energy needs by 2050. And so that finishes up our view of solar energy. Just put a couple references in here. I'll post those in the links below as well. So thank you and have a great day.